Good evening and welcome to Kopernik Observatory. I want to welcome everybody here at the observatory and also welcome those watching on the live stream. My name is Drew Desker. I'm the director here at Kopernik and really excited to have you here today and to have our speakers here this evening to talk about the record tornadoes that we've had here in New York. But before we get started, I just always like to do a very quick survey of the people here at least in the room. Who's here for the first time or not been here since your 4th grade field trip? Okay, very good. Now, who here are members? Almost everybody else. Okay. So, and also for those watching the live stream, people that raise their hands second that are members actually have a valuable piece of information, and that is how valuable a Kopernik membership is. If you like science places like this, Kopernik membership is great because it not only gets you to any one of our Friday night programs here for free, but we belong to what's called the ASTC, Association of Science and Technology Centers, and it gets you into over 380 other science centers. So you could go to Roberson, you could go to the Ithaca Science Center, Museum of Science and Technology up in Syracuse, the Franklin Institute down in Philly, or the Intrepid down in New York City, all for free. Plus, you get to skip the long line of people trying to get their tickets that day. And also, especially when you go to like the Franklin Institute or the Intrepid, the admission price for just 2 adults may be more than a whole year's membership here at Kopernik. So it's if you like this kind of place. Actually, there are people who live elsewhere that buy their membership here just so that they can get into their ASTC museums elsewhere. But Kopernik has been around for, believe it or not, 50 years. It started construction of the facility in 1973. It opened in June of 1974. Actually, this brick building, this brick wall over here, is actually part of the original outside of the building. And since then, we've had hundreds of thousands of people come through our doors here, but also even more so when we go out into the community and do our outreach. We do our Friday night programs like where we're doing this evening. We do a lot of school programs. We just had the Binghamton School District bring all their 5th graders through here in the last 2 weeks. Union Endicott starts on Monday. During the summer, we have extraordinary STEM-themed summer camps that are week-long, and these are for rising 2nd graders through high school, doing everything from just learning to think like a scientist or an engineer through, we've had our students talk to astronauts on the ISS. We've had them send weather balloons up to over 100,000 feet with the payload and then retrieve that payload. So always some really neat stuff going on. The thing I love about many things I like about Kopernik, but what I actually like these Friday nights. As I tell people, we're not just 3 telescopes on the top of a hill. We really try to promote lifelong learning. So especially you younger people here in the audience, when you get out of high school, that's not when the learning stops. And you need to continue that through your entire life. I keep thinking, I would love to live another 200 or 300 years, if my knees could stand it, just to see where technology moves. Back when I was your age, I used to have to walk to the TV to change the channel. Now it's, now it just shows up here on my phone, and who knows what the next 25 or 50 years or 100 years is going to do for technology. So it's neat to sort of get a glimpse of where we're headed, and that's sort of what these Friday night programs are about. I mentioned a moment ago that we are celebrating our 50th anniversary, and our board of directors for the last couple of years have been working on where is Kopernik headed for the next 50 years. As I said, we had the Binghamton School District in here. We're actually capacity constrained, and so we're looking to find a way to expand our facility, expand the resource, update the resources that we have here. And so we have our Reach for the Stars campaign that we are now starting to roll out. And I don't know if some of you have seen on the news just yesterday afternoon Governor Kathy Hochul came here to Kopernik and toured the facility. And during the press conference, she announced, and if you allow me, I'm going to follow me over here, that the governor's office is providing a $1 million grant for Kopernik Observatory for our Reach for the Stars campaign. Thank you. We are honored, humbled, and just extraordinarily excited about this. Although this is really just a start. With what we've got planned, it's going to cost more than more than $1 million. It won't cost $100 million. At least it better not. But I think what it also says is it's showing that how important a place like this is to a community, and we are very fortunate to have early adopters that are looking at what we do here and say, yeah, this is worth investing in. And so you'll be hearing more about it, and if you know ways of or organizations that value this kind of thing, let us know. We'd like to have some conversations with those people. But as I said, these Friday nights, I learn a lot, and people ask me, where do you come up with these ideas, for speakers? And I said, it's just stuff I'm interested in, and fortunately, we've got a National Weather Service office right here in Binghamton, and they every year I get at least one or two talks out of you, and we're very fortunate to have these experts. And what's great about it is you get to ask them questions, and if you're watching on the live stream, type it into the chat, and we'll pass them along. So what I will do, just briefly talk a little bit about our website. The website we always keep up to date. One of the things actually, they were seeing here with this is Polish Christmas dinner. And what does that have to do with Kopernik? Well, Kopernik was a Polish astronomer. And the Kopernik Observatory was actually started by the people of Polish ancestry or Polish immigrants. Actually, my parents are both Polish immigrants and were part of this Kopernik society that built this original observatory. And so part of our bylaws actually is to promote Polish heritage. So if you haven't experienced Polish Vigilia, which is the Christmas Eve dinner, we're actually going to have it on December 8th down at the DoubleTree. Check it out. It's a lot of fun, great Polish comfort food, and but beyond that, we always tell you about what else is coming down the road. So actually, on Monday the 11th is Girl Power Science, and this is actually twice a year we do a program for girls in grades 3 through 8. We're trying to get more women involved in STEM, and so this one happens to be called Hera, the Ultimate Space Camping Trip. There are actually 4 scientists and engineers that are in a habitat down in the Johnson Space Flight Center that are emulating what's it going to be like to work in a habitat on the moon and Mars. And our girls will learn about that whole process, and we'll actually have a conversation with them. A few years ago, we had one of our programs was a talk from an astrophysicist at NASA, and she was talking about how she uses satellite data to look at carbon dioxide levels and how that changes the climate. And then our girls get to ask her questions. And one of the girls asked, "How did you get interested in astrophysics?" And her answer was great. She said, "Well, when I was in college, I was an English major. Well, my boyfriend, he was a physics major. We go from observatory to observatory. I eventually dumped the boyfriend, but I kept the astronomy." Now she has her PhD in astrophysics and works at NASA. So you never know where she's going to get planted, and that's what we're hoping to do with all of our programs, but in particular with Girl Power. You can always go to our website and go to classes, events, programs, and events. Go down to public programs. You can see what's coming up. We have a listing. So tonight's program is on tornadoes. Next Friday is Peter Klimas, a physics teacher at Vestal High School, talking about astronomy, mythology, and the keeping of time. If you haven't experienced Peter Klimas, you are missing something. You got to come. He is an extraordinary teacher. It'll be a great program. The weekend, the Friday after that, CRISPR, that process of being able to manipulate DNA. Dr. Nicholas Gaidosh, one of our educators, is going to talk about that. and I don't have it listed here, but the weekend after that, we'll have a BU professor talking about biofilm. So it's not always about astronomy. All right, I've talked long enough because I was going to say this whirlwind of hot air. We're going to pass it over to you. Talk about a whirlwind of cold air, I guess. Mark Pellerito is one of the meteorologists at the National Weather Service. I've been very honored to call him friend, but he's a great resource for us. And so, Mark, we're going to change this over to your computer. And oh, actually, before we do that, I mentioned earlier about Livestream. I'm sorry, let me just talk about that. Again, we live stream all of our programs. So if you go to YouTube, go to Kopernik Observatory, you can actually go to our history, go to our videos, and you can actually see what we've done in the past. So videos, channel content. Oh, here it is, under live. So last 2 weekends ago, we were talking about comets and meteors. Then we had our astronomy festival, Astrofest. We talked about vital signs of planet Earth, fall skies. I did a talk on ham radio. We had a talk about natural building with straw bales. So it's not always about astronomy. And what's also great about our YouTube channel is these videos stay there. So if you missed it, you want to go and see it, you can check that out. All right, so now we're going to switch over to Mark. And
all right. So I think I got the microphone on, so it sounds like it. And we're doing the old switcheroo here. And yeah, thanks a lot, Drew. Exciting times here at Kopernik for many reasons. Yeah, my name's Mark Pellerito. I'm the warning coordination meteorologist at the Weather Service in Binghamton. I'm joined by a late addition, Caitlin Lardale. She's another one of our meteorologists, and the weather's quiet enough to where we were able to get her out of the office, so that's good. So she's here to observe and also to add her 2 cents when we talk about some other storm surveys and all that stuff. So yeah, 32 tornadoes in New York State this year, which absolutely obliterated the record, the prior record of 25. So there's been much interest, not just in tornadoes in general, but just like, the Weather Service has confirmed a tornado, or will be doing a storm survey today, and is it a tornado or not? There's a lot of interest in that, and so I thought I'd come here and talk a little bit about what's behind our storm surveys, how we confirm them, and also what may be behind the record number of tornadoes that we've had this year. All right, so there's a quick little map there of where all the tornado points were. Of course, they weren't just points. There were several mile paths at some points, and especially that Rome tornado, that was a doozy. And then just nearby, Canastota actually had a fatality, unfortunately. So anyway, yeah, 32 tornadoes. But before we get into the specifics of tornadoes and storm surveys, I wanted to give you a quick rundown of the types of severe weather that cause damage in our area. You have, do I have any Skywarn storm spotters here today? I'm just curious. We got Drew. Okay. This is something we go way into more detail during our Skywarn storm spotter training in the spring for all the different types of thunderstorms. We also do winter spotter trainings as well. And actually, we have a couple coming up and virtual as well if you're interested in that. If you just go to weather.gov, that's all you have to remember, weather.gov, because then you just click on our area, it takes you to our page, and you can find our Skywarn calendar there. But anyway, just to do a quick rundown of this, you got the spectrum of storms. Any of these can be severe. It's just some of them are a lot more organized and long-lasting than others. You got the single cell, which is this popcorn up, popcorn down. You got the multiple cells, and if they organize in a big line, it's called a squall line. And finally, you got supercells, which is a lot of people have heard of before. How many of you heard the term supercell before? If you watch like the Weather Channel, you hear them talk about supercells and all that stuff. That is a real thing. It's not just like an amazing supercell. It's called a supercell. So let's go ahead and get into that. First of all, the single cell, you basically boil something up. It goes straight up, but then it starts to rain out, and then it cuts itself off, and so this whole process can be under an hour. It's just a single cell that goes up and back down. But right during what's called the mature stage, where all this unloads and drops straight down, you can get severe weather just from that. Downburst winds, microburst winds are called. And you can get large hail from that too. But it just doesn't last very long because eventually the storm just falls apart. So you got single cell storms, you got multiple cell storms, which is basically if you have like a bunch of single cells but all at various stages at the same time. Here's the dissipating stage here, here's that mature stage, and then here's the single cells just starting to develop. So you get them all going out at the same time. You can get lots of interaction with the cells. Sometimes you can get, because when these things unload, they push out these boundaries, and sometimes those boundaries collide and they can do a brief spin-up tornado. That can occur, but that's not the typical way for a tornado to develop. And now if you get them all to organize in a line, this is a big squall line here. I mean, this is states long, hundreds of miles long, from Michigan to Illinois, Missouri, and tailing out, and I think that's the corner of Oklahoma down there, or at least Kansas. So these can be very, very damaging. Just a widespread swath of damaging winds on that. And speaking of, if it gets really bad, I don't know, you probably may have not heard the term derecho before.
Yes.
But that happens. when it's an especially severe windstorm from a line of thunderstorms with there's a technical definition. It has to be so much wide, has to have a path so long. But the point is, these things just tons of damage. This one's from the mid-90s, where you had 5 deaths and 11 injuries. You had just timber being mowed down, and these are $1995, by the way.
I was camping
Yeah.
during that.
And so you,
One person about a few miles away was killed by a tree.
yeah, there were a few. And what was noteworthy about this also, could you see anything? It's the middle of the night, right? This thing ripped through right in the middle of the night. So that often catches people off guard when you have these derechos ripped through right in the middle of the night. And that's just one example. Here's a close to home for Caitlin here. She grew up in Syracuse. The New York State Fair was going on at this time. This is 1998. And in the middle of the night, this ripped right through the fairgrounds and unfortunately killed people and injured others. So, yeah, these can be really, really bad. I haven't said the word tornado, have I? You know, when people see this, they're like, had to have been a tornado, right? No, it doesn't have to be a tornado. These things, the damage, instead of like a small little path, like a tornado, it's getting everybody. I mean, it's a big, widespread damage path to those. All right, but now I'll talk about tornadoes, because now we're going to get to supercells. The things that makes it a supercell is you have what's called wind shear. All right, so you have at the ground the wind going one way, and then you go several thousand feet up and the wind's going another way and faster. And so you kind of get that spin going on. So the whole storm, when it develops, can take on rotation. And if everything goes right, then that rotation tightens in the form of a tornado. So majority of tornadoes are produced by supercells, but just because you have a supercell doesn't mean you're going to get a tornado. It's like roughly 1/5 of those supercells actually make the tornado. Okay, so no tornado, so it's fine, right? No, actually, supercells produce all types of severe weather. Even if you get no tornado, you can get these ripping microbursts, downburst winds. Straight line winds are called. It doesn't have to be a straight line, but you get those downburst winds, you get very large hail, and the wind straight up in this can be like 100 miles an hour, straight up. That's how you get the baseball-sized hail. Imagine having a piece of ice that is just a golf ball, and it doesn't weigh enough to fall to the ground. Why? Because you got wind going straight up at it, and it has to get to the size of a baseball before it finally makes it to the ground. I mean, these supercells can have incredible winds straight up in these updrafts. And one last thing I'll mention, because of that wind shear, the source of energy is coming from one way, the storm is going a different direction, and so it always has that source of energy feeding into it, and that's why these can last for hours on end instead of those single cells that just cut themselves off immediately. Okay, so here's just one local example of a supercell. Here's a line, but the supercell's right there. It ran out and ahead. This was last year when we had an EF2 tornado go through Sullivan County, New York, right through Jeffersonville, and then ending at Roscoe. And the sign down there is still one of the gas station signs, I think. I can't remember. But you can still see the damage even now. All right, whoops, wrong direction. Let's try that again. Okay, so how are tornadoes rated? This thing called the Enhanced Fujita Scale. I'll blow this up in a moment so you can read it better. But the Enhanced Fujita Scale was originally called the Fujita Scale, which is some guy's last name. Dr. Ted Fujita of the University of Chicago developed this scale of how to classify, it's a damage-based scale, how to classify tornado strength. And so he had these numbers associated with F0 to F5. F5 being the strongest, the most destructive, the rarest too. You don't get many of these. And he associated it with wind speeds of exactly 262 miles per hour to 317 miles per hour. All right, so you had this Fujita scale, but it was based on damage to human-made structures. So if you have a really, really strong tornado, but it's just in the middle of a cornfield, it's just called F0. Well, that's, we need more damage indicators than just houses, right? Or man-made structures. So what made it enhanced is not just the University of Chicago, one very amazing professor, but you had engineers and wind tunnels and just multiple disciplines coming together to create a better scale, which became effective in 2007. And this enhanced Fujita scale now it's called EF instead of F. EF. What makes it enhanced is that there's much more current science, multiple disciplines, and so you have this scale now with numbers that are appropriate for the damage that is associated with it. I'm going to back up one slide just to mention one more thing. So what do you do with the tornadoes before 2007? Well, one of the ways they designed this was if you have an F1, say in 1990, and an EF1 in 2010, they are roughly comparable. It's just the numbers now are better understood for what it would take for that level of damage to occur. So it's roughly translatable, not a perfect match, but close. And it maintains the climatological record that way. Okay, so you got the EF0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 5 being incredible damage. Once you're past 200 miles an hour, well, could there be an F6? How about EF7, EF8? Well, once you get to 200 plus, it no longer matters. Everything's scoured and wiped away. And everything's still scoured and wiped away if you increase it by another 20, 30, 40 miles per hour. No longer matters. So, and there may be an upper limit. I don't know what that is. I don't know what the laws of physics will create as an actual maximum. But these are exceedingly rare to get EF5 tornadoes. When's the last one? I mean, man, EF5 tornado in the United States. It's been years. It's been many years.
Sorry, I'm losing my voice, so if that's why I sound really bad. But EF5, I'm not sure. But Mark, I have a question for you, and I don't know if you bring it up in your presentation.
Okay. What
happens when meteorologists rate an EFU or EF unknown?
Oh, that's good. Because, if you have, say, a supercell going over Lake Ontario, and there's video of this tornado, we have no idea there's no way to rate the damage, right? If there's no way to actually rate what the wind speed was, it's called an EFU, and I'm going to say that carefully. EF unknown. So there actually are a handful of tornadoes every year which are rated EF unknown.
So one of the ones that Buffalo had, when they were doing their survey, I believe it was in Oswego County. I don't remember.
Yeah.
But it'll be labeled EF-U next to it, and then on the news they usually put it like the same way, and that's sometimes you have to put the actual unknown factor because we don't have a rating for it, so it's just unknown.
Yeah, but most of them are at least estimated in some way, in ways that I'm about to go into here. Before I get too deep, so EF5, exceedingly rare. There are many years that not a single one of them occur in the United States, even though most years there are over 1,000 tornadoes in the United States. Now, EF4s, that's every once in a great while. You're going to run into a couple of those every few years. The 3s and 2s, that happens every year somewhere. And actually, you'll see an example soon, EF2. But for New York, almost all of them are EF0, EF1, and a very occasional EF2. So in our climatological record that we know of, 547 tornadoes. Yeah.
The Moore, Oklahoma one was the last in 2013.
Thank you.
Yeah, sorry.
This is why I'm glad we have a second person here.
Repeat it.
Yeah. Oh, right. Okay. Moore, Oklahoma, in 2013 was the last EF5 tornado. So it's been more than a decade since we've had an EF5. Those are the ones that make the news, right? Unfortunately, those are the ones that cause the most damage, the most deaths, all of that. So, but then here in New York, we get EF0, EF1. And actually, this is across the country. Most tornadoes are EF0, EF1, EF2. And you don't hear about those on national news all that much. But, still quite capable of damage. If you do, since in the EF era, since we've gone to the enhanced Fujita scale since 2007, if you average it out for every 5 years, and every 5 years New York State has roughly 53 tornadoes, so maybe 10-ish a year. And then of those, only 1, maybe 2 per year, total of about 6 every 5 years for EF2 level damage. EF3s have happened before in New York State. I forget the number, but it's not many. Okay. Oops, that's the whole scale. All right. So that was a little bit about the enhanced Fujita scale, but now we're going to talk about our storm surveys and how do we determine, was it a tornado or not? What was it, and how strong was it? All right. So how many of you think this was a tornado? You may be tempted to say, oh, yeah, that had to have been a tornado because look at all those trees are all mowed down, uprooted, different directions, sounded like a freight train. It's a microburst. And so that's one of the important things, one of the takeaways that I want you to take home with you is to realize that you don't have to have a tornado to have incredible damage. And in fact, in our area, it is usually the microburst, the downburst, the derechos that cause the most damage, the most deaths, most injuries. What's the first question we get whenever we do a storm survey? Just take a guess. Was it a tornado? It's like, ooh, this important status of was it a tornado or not? It's interesting, it is, but remember, most tornadoes in New York are up to and including about 100 miles an hour or so, which basically all of our downbursts and microbursts do that too. if they just do it on more widespread instead of a little pad. So that's why for our area, our downbursts and microbursts can be significantly worse. But yes, you do occasionally get the Rome tornado, which we'll get to in a moment. So here, check this out. Sounded like a freight train, put down a whole bunch of trees, had to have been a tornado. No, this right here is straight line winds. And I say straight line winds, that is kind of one of those misnomers. I almost wish we wouldn't call it straight line winds. I like downburst better because it descends from the storm and spreads out, like a water balloon hitting the ground and spreads out, diverges. So you can get different directions with that, right? Here's the other thing, if it's hitting the ground and spreading out, we're not in the Great Plains here. We're on a hilltop right now. It's like, 1,800 feet here? 1,750? I forget. 1,750. And we have very complicated terrain. And if this downburst is hitting the ground in very complicated terrain, you're going to get all these fingers going all sorts of different directions around the geography, the topography. So it's complicated, different directions, right? Or say it hits a house and goes around the house. Then you got trees going different directions. The key, though, is in the big picture. Is it diverging? Is it spreading out? Is it mowing it over? That's your straight line winds. So with a tornado, you kind of get more of a chaotic, what we like to call like a food processor, just kind of everything all kind of chewed up. But the key is converging towards, coming towards a common path. And of course you get different directions there. But say this tornado is ripping along itself at 50 miles an hour. Well, then most of the trees are going to be laying in one direction. But you have to look at the big picture and it's like, okay, are we getting a convergence towards a common path, even if most of the trees are laying in one direction? You got to see if it's converging. So it is complicated. Overall, the convergence and divergence is the biggest hint. This right here, just another example where you get these trees kind of teepeeing into a path, kind of like these arrows here. So if this tornado itself is going very fast, a lot of the trees are going to be laying this way, but some of them will be either laying back this way or at least kinking in a little bit, a convergence of a path there. And here's the other thing, and we get this all the time whenever we have big storms. The trees are all twisted in my yard, so it had to have been a tornado. No, it did not have to be a tornado. Because with you got the issues of, is it a healthy tree? Is it a rotted tree? Is the tree bigger on one side than the other? Is the wind going around a house or around a hill? It can be very complicated. And the size of a tornado is much larger than the size of a tree. And so a tornado scale, whatever's going on, is, on a single tree, you need more than a single tree of evidence. You need the big picture to know what's really going on there. And you can hit. Now, this is something that often happens with tornadoes. If we see what we call missiles, and not like missiles like shooting off missiles, but I mean, we actually call them missiles, where you have objects lofted by the tornado and then driven into the walls and into the ground. And this is February this year, Castle Creek. We had, Broome County, we were the trendsetter for our 32 tornadoes in New York State. The first one was in February 28th, Castle Creek, and all these pieces of barn got driven into the ground. Here's one from last year in Pennsylvania, and then here's the Rome tornado where this wall just got impaled by all sorts of objects. So if you see a bunch of missiles, that's a good indicator that maybe it was a tornado, not just straight line winds. Okay, so that's, what is it? What caused this? Now there is, how strong was it? So as part of that enhanced Fujita scale we were talking about, I think it was Texas Tech, I want to say Texas Tech, and a bunch of other experts all got together, including the Weather Service and all that, to come up with this enhanced Fujita scale. And I'm going to, just for giggles, just show you how thorough this is. Wind Science and Engineering, Texas Tech. And there are 95 pages of all the science and examples that go into this. We won't be reading through that, but just the point is, this is very thorough. And also, there are many more damage indicators than just human-made structures. And so now let me show you a blow-up of that. This is just an example of, it's available online too, all the different types. Softwood trees, hardwood trees, poles, towers, canopies, large shopping mall, farms, outbuildings, single wide, double wide. There's just so many of them. And then with each of these, you get the whole scale based on all that science and engineering and wind tunnels and everything else, and review of past damage of an expected value, an upper bound, and a lower bound, and the degree of damage from 1 to 9. So say you have here a single wide manufactured home, and we're just going to go right through say you're in a storm survey, you come across this mobile home becoming a little more mobile than you'd like, and it's pushed off block piers, but otherwise remains upright. And now you actually have, it's not just like, well, man, the wind had to be pretty strong. I wonder how strong. No, you actually got some numbers to put to it. And you never just take one. You never just take one example and say, okay, this is what it was. You take the big picture of the entire area, all the trees, all the structures. And in this case, you might assign, okay, oops, hello. If it was like, say, a well-built structure with really good foundation and all that, maybe you put it more towards 100 miles an hour. But if this thing's just kind of sitting on cinder blocks with nothing really tying it down, okay, let's go more like to the lower bound of 70-ish, or if it's average, 87-ish miles per hour. So that's exactly how we do this on storm surveys. We collect all these different damage indicators on the scene and put numbers together and eventually decide what was it and how strong was it. So here's an example. One of our lead meteorologists actually took this photo from his drone, I think. Had to have been from his drone. I don't know how else he would have gotten it. So here you have a big storm, and you have this thing called, you see this? Where the shaft of rain's coming, all of a sudden it stretches over. That's called a rain foot. That can be kind of like an indicator that, here, the wind's coming down, slamming the ground, and spreading out. So cool photo. Even better time lapse. And so one of our Sky One spotters who runs a Vestal Weather Facebook sent this to us and allowed us to go ahead and use it for educational purposes. Let's see if I can make it bigger. Hold on. There we go. And the rain foot stretching out and squeegeeing up the air right ahead of it. So no tornado. Didn't need to be a tornado to be damaging. It can be very damaging. So that was back in August. Now let's pretend that you're doing a storm survey. So this right here, at Union Endicott High School, and superintendent gave us permission to use this for educational purposes too. So here's the scene. Storm's coming. Flags are blowing a little bit, but otherwise nothing too crazy. And I'm putting this forward and looking like this a couple minutes later. It almost looks like winter, doesn't it? It's just rain. I promise the wind is not moving the car, but you are about to see it move other things because the wind is getting stronger at this point. And there goes the light pole, flagpole, whatever it is. And then the other one goes behind it too, though it's kind of hard to see. Some serious wind here. Can't see anything. Notice this is real time. It's not a time lapse. This is real time you're looking at. So there you see pole 1 down, pole 2 down, and then if you look closely, what's this? Yeah, debris, which turned out to be some roof covering of a nearby building. All right, so, and I don't know what all that is. Okay, hold on. All right, so, how strong? Let's go to our handy-dandy Enhanced Fujita Scale guidebook. And we're like, okay, this is number 26, freestanding light poles, luminary poles, flag poles. All right, okay. Wait a minute, a lower bound of a collapsed pole, 99 miles an hour? And then, okay, let's think about it some more. Oh, these are the examples that they give. these giant freeway ones. You know, this is what they're basing that's not the freeway ones. These are smaller poles. And then also, let me go back to the video one more time. This is not just a flagpole. This is a perfectly aligned sail. It couldn't be better aligned. And it has something to focus bending on. You know, like a wall. It's right against the wall, so folds right over. It couldn't be more ideally located. So having a couple of those bend over, maybe we don't go straight to the 100-mile-an-hour wind on that, right? It's not one of these, you know, these freeway poles. It's smaller poles, and it was just like perfectly aligned, and it wasn't a flag. It was like practically a sail. So let's look for other clues instead. And when we do that, we see, oh, okay, loss of roof covering off of one of the nearby buildings, somewhere around 65 to 78 miles per hour. Seems like a more reasonable estimate. And based on the other damage in the area, that's what we went with, is something around 70, 75 miles per hour, rather than going right to the 99. So you always have to consider the big picture on that. All right, so here's Linkland State Forest, EF1 tornado. I mean, I was on this one. Trunk snaps all over the place, chaotic trees everywhere. It was really pretty thorough. And then here's Montour Falls. We had a microburst descend and just unfortunately push down a bunch of trees all over mobile homes. This right here is actually from the EF scale itself, because we don't have a local example of this, where you actually have trees debarked with only stubs of largest branches remaining. And that's where you're getting, you know, some pretty high levels here. So notice there is an upper bound on these. EF5 tornado is more than 200 miles an hour, but it takes less than 200 miles per hour to mow all the trees down. There's an upper limit to what you can gauge just from looking at trees. You have to start looking at structures as you get to the stronger levels. Okay, the other thing you have to consider is the health of the trees and the root systems of these trees. You know, if it's like in a creek bed and really wet and shallow, rocky, it's not going to take much wind to take it down. Whereas if it's like a really, really healthy tree and a giant root ball here, I mean, that's going to take some serious wind. And also I want to mention one other thing. When you have trees uprooting, you just have to start it. And if you get it just a little bit, the weight of the tree will do the rest of the work and just pull it on over. However, if you have a tree trunk snap, that takes more wind. That takes more power to actually break that trunk. Now, not a large branch, the entire trunk snaps. That is worse than an uproot, because the uproot, the gravity does a lot of the work, whereas a trunk snap just takes a lot of power. Okay, so storm hits. Everyone wants to know what was it. Oh, come on, Weather Service, why are you taking so long? It's 6 o'clock in the evening, and we still don't know what it was, and it was yesterday. Come on. There's a pretty step-by-step process here. We got to drive there, and you know we don't have a Weather Service office in every county, right? We serve 2.5 million people, 24 different counties. So sometimes we have to drive pretty darn far away to get to this damage, like Rome, New York, up by Utica there. And then we have to, you know, whatever the road network allows, we can't necessarily access everything. Sometimes it's private property and we don't have permission to go back there. So it's like, you know, so that takes time. And it's one thing if we already knew the path, but we don't. So we really do have to be driving all these roads and trying to find all the damage. And plot them on a map and all that stuff. And then we got to drive back. And then we plot everything, determine if, okay, was it a tornado, was it straight line winds? We usually do that by this point. But still, the layout, the big picture, write up damage summaries, finalize the map. This takes a long time. Yeah.
So, sorry, You hear me? Oh, now you can.
Yeah.
Sorry again for my voice, but I mean, even with number 2 and 5, like we have to map out all, like look at any of the reports we had gotten. We'll see what address they are, and if they're private property, you know, if there's someone outside, we'll say, you know, we're with the Weather Service, we're assessing damage. You know, can we come on your property and take a look? And we talk to, you know, all sorts of people, from regular neighborhood people to, we'll have emergency management with us, guiding us as well.
This all takes time.
It takes a lot of time. And sometimes we're trekking through woods sometimes to
Yeah.
go to, as far as it'll allow, because, you know, the tornado doesn't care if it's a populated area or not. It's going to go where nature took it. So sometimes we have to go off the beaten path, and we're wearing boots, and sometimes it's still raining outside, and it takes a long time.
Or there's another set of storms coming
Or
right
there's
at
more.
you.
If there's more storms the next day, we'll have to
Like
either-
July 15 and 16.
That's right. Yeah, the 2 consecutive days of the storms, and sometimes we'll just, you know, have to postpone it or wait, you know, or do it really, really, hopefully fast enough before the storms come. And
Yeah.
there's a lot of different factors that go into the planning before doing it, and then even the after process of it as well.
Typically, the day of, we're issuing warnings.
Yeah.
Storms are going from point A to point B. We got to keep putting out warnings, and then we make a plan for the next day to go do the survey. It's pretty rare for us to do a survey on the same day of the storm, because there's only so much we can do. But I'll give you an example of a same-day survey coming up here. All right, so this is kind of old school, you know, literally driving to all these places and all that stuff, and you know, writing things down in a notebook. We don't do that as much anymore. So we've had to evolve a little bit. So now we have this thing called the Damage Assessment Toolkit, or we like calling it the DAT because we're acronym happy as a government agency. So in the DAT, which we can load on a phone, we take a photo. These are all geotagged, right? And we're laying it out on a map in real time as we're doing the survey, and the people back at the office can see us, you know, see the points being laid out on the map. So this is all quickening the process. We can link the photos right to that map, so even back at the office they can start seeing this as well, and seeing the layout of this Castle Creek tornado, for example, where across the road and then did a lot of damage and threw these hay wagons all over the place. So that's one of our more recent evolving techniques there. And then once you get, this is just one tornado, and over the course of a year you can collect a lot of storm surveys, lots of tornado surveys, downburst surveys, and all that stuff. So when do we do surveys? Because here on the left is all the tornadoes this year, 1,700 and change. But on the right is the 16,000 damage reports. We can't possibly chase down every single tree, every report of it sounded like a freight train, every Facebook comment of all of the cloud was really scary and twisting, so why aren't you here yet doing a storm survey? There's only so much we can do. So we have to use our best judgment to discern when a survey is worth doing, when we really should go do survey. So number one is, you know, if the locals, city, county, or state emergency management is like, and this is their job, you know, emergency management, right? They know this kind of stuff, and they know what's less serious and what's more serious. And if they see a big swath of a lot of damage, they'll say, hey, we'd like to request a survey. And we go and we do our survey. If we're aware of a concentrated swath of damage, not just a tree here, tree there, then we'll probably go do a survey. If there's significant impact in general, like say it hits a major population center and there's just a lot of damage and people injured and unfortunately even killed, okay, maybe we will survey that even if we don't have other evidence yet to really figure out what happened. Because not only do we want to know for science reasons, we want to know for warning reasons. We put out a warning. Was it worth it? Should we have put it out 5 minutes sooner? Did we recognize the signs in time? You know, this is for our own performance too, so that we can learn and do better. If we have strong reason to suspect a tornado, tornadic debris signature. It's a thing. And I'm trying to remember, when did we get dual polarity radar? When? When did that start? It's been, I'm gonna guess 8 or 9-ish years, something like that. Radar is its own talk. We won't get into that. But what the latest iteration of radar, called dual polarity, allows us to guess what kind of objects are blowing around. Is it just rain? Is it rain and hail? Is it debris? There's actually a signal we can see for actual tornadic debris. But it's pretty rare to actually see that on a radar. Usually what we see instead is strong rotation. 2010.
Dual pole, 2010.
Oh, it's been that long.
Yeah.
Oh man, time flies. So okay, it's been about 14 years. All right, so if we that in itself, we actually see debris being lofted up, not over, up to where the radar beam is, thousands of feet up. We know it was a tornado already, without even having to look at the ground yet. So if we already know there was a debris signature, we're going to go do a survey. But we still have to assess the details. So yeah, that's why we do the survey, not just confirmation of what it was. If we have lots of photographic and video evidence of, to where we can start seeing a picture of like, okay, this is worth doing a survey, and possible tornado, and then we'll go check it out. But if we issue a tornado warning, a lot of our tornado warnings don't actually make a tornado. We put a tornado warning out when we see very strong rotation and other signs that a tornado may be imminent. But if the tornado warning happens and then we don't really hear of any other damage other than a tree down here and there, we're not going to go chase down a survey and see, okay, maybe we can find where a tornado was. No, we don't do that. We don't have the bodies to just chase every tree. So those are the reasons right there why we would do a survey. That there's significant damage, and or we are requested by emergency management. Okay, so here's some more evolving techniques. This is not available right away. Storm hits, it doesn't mean the next day this is available. But in the days coming, you get this satellite imagery, which is getting to be pretty high resolution these days. This right here is an example where we did a storm survey. Oh, yeah, there was a tornado, and it ended right around Horton Road. But we couldn't get back here. And then many days later, we found out, hey, there's actually a swath that keeps going. And so you can actually see, before there was no damage here in these trees, but after there was this damage that extended way up here. So we adjusted the results of the survey to get a more accurate path length on that. So that was up in Oneida County there, that example. And so we're starting to do that a little more. Right here is one of our Weather Service Albany meteorologists in tandem with the New York State Police, who offered this. Hey, we can send up our drone. And so hard to access area, but suddenly you're getting a big picture of exactly what happened. And you're able, so that's another way of doing a survey. We can't fly drones ourselves. We don't have our own drones, but just many counties these days have their own drone. And if they're requesting a survey and we can say, hey, do you have a drone? Next thing you know, they're flying a drone for us and sending us pictures. So that's very, very helpful. Okay, so now that we have a storm survey and we know what happened, at least to the degree that we can, now it gets entered into the climatological record. We send out, a statement. This is the old school statement that just describes in words, but also like on social media, here's a radar imagery of the rotation, here's all the different damage that occurred, start point, end point, statistics. So now we get the word out of what actually happened. Yes, it was a tornado. Here's how strong it was. Oops, wrong way, hold on. Okay. And also, it's not just us putting out this word, but here's Madison County also, sharing what we've shared with them. Yep, they did a storm survey. They said it was a tornado. Here's how you can get help. They did that there. Or here's us doing this right here was a 100-mile-per-hour microburst in Tompkins County. And so we shared the pictures from that. This was an older one here. But yeah, so we get the word out. And it's not just getting the word out, for interest, but also getting it into the climatological record. And in the end, you end up seeing, You can call up Broome County, see all the tornadoes that happened over the years. Anybody remember the F3 in 1998? It sure is really close to right here. It was just north of the state line, and it pretty much paralleled it all the way across. And that was a doozy. And it is forever in the climatological record, still there. Oops, I just pulled this up the other day. Description of everything that happened, how strong it was, amount of damage, date, all that stuff. All right, so, and it's important to know the climatological record, right? So this right here, 1986 to 2015, this is the number of tornado days per year within 25 miles of any point. And don't worry too much about the numbers, just look at the shading, and you see, okay, we're not Tornado Alley, but we do get tornadoes. You know, yes, Tornado Alley's Central Plains and into the Ohio Valley, Mississippi Valley, Deep South. That's where they get most tornadoes. But what's going on here, do you suppose? So this is the tornadoes by year 1950 to 2023. Anybody have a guess what might be behind this? Could be. Yep, could be. Yes, that too. So my point here is there's probably multiple reasons, and the science on that is definitely ongoing. This right here is a couple slides another office made. Just a couple, I know it's tiny print, but main points here is if you go not just EF0s, but say EF1 and up, the stronger tornadoes, that number hasn't changed all that much. We're becoming much more aware of every little spinny now because better radar, higher resolution radar, we can see every little rotation. Social media, we're getting inundated with photos and videos all the time. And so all these little itty bitty tornadoes, which before may have escaped notice, now we're finding out about. So that, you know, I don't know to how much degree that is contributing, but it's a pretty big contribution to why those numbers keep going up. Couple other things that have changed. The number of, even though the overall number in the U.S. hasn't changed all that much when you're talking EF1 and up, the number of them that occur in clusters, like outbreaks, the actual number of outbreaks seems to be increasing. You do have some seasonal changes too. Remember when I said February? February, what are we having a tornado in February for? You know, there's just some seasonal changes going on there. The number of days that there are tornadoes might actually be going down, but again, when they do happen, they're happening in bigger batches. And the number of tornadoes on each of these tornadoes, again, they're happening in groups more. That's one thing that's becoming apparent. But the key point here, a large number of the extra tornadoes we see these in this day and age are EF0s to maybe low-end EF1s that in the past we wouldn't even know about. Now we do. So the science on all that is definitely still ongoing. That's a numbers thing. How about a where thing? This is something that actually is shifting. It's been documented. This is one of our experts at the National Severe Storms Laboratory, which is in Oklahoma. So he's a NOAA guy. NOAA is the National Oceanic Atmospheric Administration, in tandem with one of the authors at Northern Illinois University. You know, they did this paper and did all sorts of statistics on this. What you're seeing here is not numbers of tornadoes. What you're seeing here is what's called the significant tornado parameter. That's an actual index of the conditions that are needed, put all together, all the conditions, the instability, the wind shear, different directions, all that. You put all that together and you get this index of, all right, what supports stronger tornadoes and what doesn't really support those stronger tornadoes. And so when you put that all together over time, and you see these yellow, orange, and red shades, the increase in supportive conditions that you need for tornadoes. There's an increase in that. All right, so big shift here from the Central Plains, more towards further to the east, more the deep south, the lower Ohio Valley, those red shades. Conditions needed for large, for stronger tornadoes. Those conditions are increasing with time. This time frame happens to be 1979 to 2017 that increase occurs. Now, this is still Tornado Alley in Texas and Oklahoma. Of course it is. They still get more tornadoes than anywhere else. It's just it's less supportive than it was in the past compared to their average. Understand? And so these shades of yellow here may suggest, okay, maybe we are getting an increase in tornadic-like conditions, but we're not Tornado Alley. It's just compared to our old average, our new average might be skewing higher. That makes sense? Okay. So, but I am not a tornado climatology expert myself. I'm not. But we do have people in NOAA and all the academia all over the country where this science is ongoing. Okay, so let's bring it back home. New York State, why in the heck did we get 32 tornadoes? The biggest reason was 1 week. 1 week in which almost all these tornadoes occurred. Average year for New York State, about 10 tornadoes. All right? If you take July 10 through 16, that week out, we had 10 tornadoes in New York State. But we had two situations in particular that were just very, I don't want to say we won the lottery because this is the anti-lottery. Nobody wants to win this lottery. But we just had a remarkable setup where on July 15, 16, you had these clusters. You can even see it here. This is, these are states here. This is New York. That's Pennsylvania. Here are the Great Lakes. And you can just see the twisting going on in the satellite imagery, right? And all the storms contained within were able to harness that rotation, and some of them made tornadoes. And by some, I mean 15 that we know of. 15 confirmed tornadoes, including the Rome EF2 tornado, which we put at the very top of the range of EF2 at 135 miles per hour. And Caitlin was there on that. Anything you want to say about Rome?
I think it's, there we go. I've done I'm newer in the Binghamton office, so I've only been gone on a few storm surveys, right? This one, I worked the day this tornado happened, which was the day before, and then actually going out there, it's two different things to work, an event behind radar, behind screens and stuff and watching it, but it's another to go out there and see this happening in a community. I grew up in Syracuse. I have friends who live in Rome and work in Rome, and to see this happen to a community is just, it's emotionally draining. And we're out there, we're trying to be as professional as possible, get the job done. We were out there 12 plus hours, including, the drive there and back same day. And, I don't remember if I took this picture, but I took a lot of the pictures, but just to see that whole building, and right next to it, if you saw the cars to the left, completely crushed by debris, completely crushed. It was just, that's just from an emotional standpoint. We could talk about the science all day, but this is reality, right? When you walk out the door after a tornado and you see this, you still have to maintain, the professionalism and get the job done, because that's what we're there for. But to see it and knowing that's a community very close to home, specifically for me, that this could happen. This could easily happen in Syracuse, which is 45 miles west, maybe give or take, whatever it may be. It's incredible to see, at least from the emotional standpoint.
Thanks, Caitlin. That's what I was hoping you'd bring up, because as you'll see in the slide I'm about to bring up, I mean, it's gee whiz, wow, fascinating, amazing science, but it's real people. Yes. Here's the other special thing that happened that same week, earlier that week, is that we had the remnants of Hurricane Beryl. Usually we are not to the east of a tropical track. For us, usually if we get involved, we get a pile of rain from a storm coming up the coast or to our east. But in this case, we're to the east of the track. And the way tropical systems work, on the east side of that track, you can get that wind shear to work out well for tornadoes to actually occur. And so here on this day, we had all these tornado warnings. Not all of these warnings made tornadoes, but strong rotation in all of these cells, and seven tornadoes actually occurred. So that's 2 events you're talking about there. The 15-16, kind of a double event together, same setup. So that event, and then the associated with Beryl, and it's a pretty powerful tornado you're looking at there. This one's in Eden, New York, in the Weather Service Buffalo's area. That was 22 out of our 32 tornadoes right there. So to point to a single season's number and say, oh, I know exactly why that was. Like say, like in a bigger picture of climate change or all that, can't really do that. But are extreme events more possible in the climate change? Sure. But in this case, it was 2 very special events, all contained within 1 week, that made the boatload of tornadoes that we had. Okay, and this is to the point that we were just talking about. That this is all really fascinating, and numbers and this and that and science and oh my goodness, but it's not just numbers. We're on the ground. First of all, we're coordinating with the locals because they're the ones who know their people. If we show up, with like a little Weather Service emblem, just like, hey, first thing they think is, oh great, you're the Weather Channel, or you're with media, or get out of my face, I just, lost half my house. You can't just do that. That's why we coordinate with the locals know so-and-so and this and that, and they kind of, there are, what's the word? Liaison, yes. Liaison, ambassador, whatever you want to call it. It's that they're the person who help. I mean, sometimes it is just us, and we're just having to do our best. But, we have to talk to the real people here who have been impacted, or who, sometimes we're talking about injuries and deaths here. Back to remember how I said storm surveys are usually the day after? We had one happen where in the morning the storm just completely barreled through and went and mowed down a campground. 2 campgrounds, actually. And it was early enough in the day and the storms had gone, there was like, let's go. We had already heard that something serious, like really bad happened. And we get out there and do the storm survey. And I get there and everything's still a war zone. And, people were standoffish at first at this particular campground, but then when we explained it and on all that, they were okay with us being there. But, somebody died there at that campground. Not a tornado. This is just a microburst, which I hope your takeaway here is there is no such thing as just a microburst. You had 90+ mile-an-hour winds ripping through here, which is as strong as most of our tornadoes, right? And you're at a campground, and a tent's not going to help you. And in this case, this is like a little, kind of like a cabin thing. And this tree was very wide, trunk snap, went right down on it. And to be there the same day that the storm occurred, and you're just looking at that and you're like, wow, somebody just died there. That's heavy. One more story that I will bring up is, do you remember the super outbreak of 2011? Anybody remember that? There were like hundreds of tornadoes all in one day. Mostly, Alabama, southeast, south. And then it actually got up here too. We had 1 or 2 tornadoes up here in the middle of the night even. Well, I was dispatched down to Alabama as what's called an incident meteorologist to offer weather support for all the people who were there for FEMA and all throughout the state, because they still had, they had the EF3, EF4, EF5 paths all over the state. And the people who are responding to it have nowhere to take shelter for any additional storms. There is no shelter. I was standing, I'll never forget it, and this was 2 weeks after the storms, in a heavily wooded area, and I can see the horizon through a tunnel. And I can see the horizon through that tunnel, and I'm standing right in the middle of it. Just a huge path that leveled everything in sight, and you could smell the earth as if it had been torn open. You could still smell it 2 weeks later. My last day there, God, I'm choking up already. All right, allow me to gather myself. But my last day there, I'm in Tuscaloosa, and I'm standing in a 4 path, went right through the middle of town. And so the Army Corps of Engineers was there, and she's like kind of taking me around. And then she's like, you see that? And you see 3 bouquets, like a Memorial Day type bouquets. She's like, that is where 3 little girls died when their chimney and their entire house collapsed down on them. And, you know, God, I didn't expect this. So, storm surveys, gee whiz, fascinating. Let's go see Twister, you know, like, it's the real people. Real lives, real livelihoods. And so, it's stuff you carry with you throughout a career and beyond. All right, and that's it. At this point, any questions? Oh yeah, cue up the mic here.
So, yeah, what I'd like to do is have you answer the question in the microphone here so people in the live stream can hear it.
So, are all tornadoes visible to the naked eye if you're out there and one's passing through? Like, do they all have the funnel clouds that we've all seen? Or are there tornadoes without funnel clouds?
Yeah, good question. The key is, all a tornado is it's air in motion. Air moving in a circle, and the pressure really changes and all that stuff. And when the pressure really drops, you can get the moisture in that air to condense. When it condenses, you see the visible funnel. So if you are, say, in an environment where it's just really, really moist, really, really humid, you're going to see a tornado almost every time. But if the air is kind of dry, you may not see the bottom. You may see a funnel halfway down, but you can't see the air swirling under it still because it's all too dry. But you might see the swirling debris underneath that. In our part of the country, because we have a lot of moisture here, usually, yes, you will see the physical tornado. The problem for us is that there's also mountains and trees and low clouds in the way. So you may not see it until it's right on you. So that's a tough thing. And that, you know, if you're in the high plains, like I was in Montana for a couple of years in the weather service there, I would actually feel pretty comfortable telling people, say, oh, you see a tornado, that tornado 10 miles from here. Yeah, try to drive away from it. I guess you can do that. But here, I would never say that, because you can't see the tornado till it's right on top of you, and there's just so many trees around here too. So, yeah. All right.
Any other questions? Oh, hold on. Here we go.
When I was in that straight line storm in the Adirondacks, and we held the tent up, but everything else went. And when we were going home, we were going across, it goes between, let's say, the Adirondacks and Watertown. and the sky was, the entire sky was bright red. I mean, bright. You know, it wasn't like when the sun comes up. So we drove this long, and it just never ended. And finally, as we started south, you didn't see this. It was amazing.
That's wild.
I don't know.
And
Do that, but we
And not knowing the exact situation, I can't even try to explain it, other than to say severe storms and tornadic storms can cause all sorts of strange optical phenomena. We didn't get too deep into supercells, but other than to say they rotate, right? And when they rotate, you can get this thing called a hook echo peeling off to the side. You're talking about heavy rain bending like a lens, and that can bend the light when you get that rotating storm. And so people talk about that sky turn green. Yeah, it's all sorts of weird optical phenomena can happen with storms.
I got another question back here.
How important is the work that storm chasers do in Tornado Alley and other areas?
Yes, please.
So I don't know if I would. I don't know this person personally, but I think their handle, they have like Storm Chaser, but they do provide. So around here, sometimes on social media we see this person. I have no idea who he is or anything like that, but I see their posts, on social media of reports and stuff, and I know they drive around specifically. I think they're from the Syracuse area, and they drive around where we, are expecting storms that day, and they will storm chase, I presume. And I would say for us, in our area, they're not. If you've seen the new Twister, is it Twisters with an S?
Twisters now,
with
yeah.
an S. Like, they're not like that with big, like, vans or anything, at least around here. So I don't think they are. But at least in my eyes, any report that we're getting, whether it be a photo, a video, or even like a, hey, I just saw, roughly this size hail in this location, this is where I am, we can look at radar and take a look. Any information like that is important. It's for us to look at to validate that what we're, seeing on radar and either warning on or maybe have not warned on yet, and we're trying to make that decision is helpful. And I can't speak for other offices like in the plains or anything like that, but I presume that it's as helpful as it is to us that is to them as well. So they could be storm chasers, it could be you guys. Any report we get is a report that helps us either make a decision, validate a decision, reanalyze what we're doing, anything. It's better to have an abundance of this information than not, because sometimes we drive blind. We can't look out the window counties over, to see we can't see anything counties over, right? We only looking at radar, trying to look at webcams, but the ground truth, which could be your neighborhood, just a simple photo, and you post on Facebook. You could literally just tag like New York weather or something like that. We look at all the hashtags and all that just to see what we could find. So it goes beyond just the storm chasers. It goes to you guys too, to the ground truth, because ultimately that helps validate us as well. I don't know if you have
Yeah, there are certainly yahoos out there, especially in the the plains. Like the tours even. Like paid tours. Let's go find tornadoes. So you have that, but you also have there are dedicated storm chasers. We would never recommend anybody to storm chase. We're not going to tell somebody to storm chase on our behalf ever. We wouldn't do that. But there are some pretty avid storm chasers out there who have relationships with their weather service offices, and they are giving them the play-by-play of what the storm is doing. We can only guess what it's doing based on what's radar showing us, but we don't know. We don't have the eyes there unless we get those reports.
I've got a question, and I'll come to you as next. People have weather stations on their house or whatever, or
Yeah.
I'm sure you obviously, like anemometers. At what point do you sort of trust the data that's coming out of that? I mean, I guess what's the highest wind speed that you feel that's a valid wind speed from an anemometer, either a commercial one or a professional one?
That's a good question. I mean, if we see how it's situated and all that, like say it's We know it's here at the hilltop,
Right.
very exposed to winds, and we see an 80-mile-an-hour gust, whereas like in town it's just 50, 55. We'll believe that. If it's just one all by itself and it just does not make sense, and it's like there's no reports of damage, 80-mile-an-hour wind, we should be hearing about damage. Not getting, we try to, it's a piece of information,
Okay.
and we would take it for what it's worth, and if it completes the big picture.
All right. I've got a question over here.
You mentioned borrowing drones. I was just curious why your office doesn't have one of their own.
This is kind of a bureaucracy question. No, seriously, like there's all these levels of,
We actually have to have a commercial pilot's license
There you go.
to do that. I mean, the little, DJI drones are, the little, residential kind of things, isn't going to do it for you. You need a professional drone, and then you actually need to get a commercial pilot's license.
For official use, there's all these levels of bureaucracy that we would have to meet that we just can't. But a county emergency management, they'll have their own, they'll fly it for us on our behalf, and then we're great. That's like a lot easier than meeting all the levels of bureaucracy for us to be, as a federal agency, to be allowed to do that. Yeah.
Mark, I appreciate everything you've shared tonight. It's, complete education for me, I'll admit, from the ground up. But we live on a top of a little hill down in Brackney, and there's a higher hill just north of us and a little bit higher one just a little bit south of us. But one of the things I've observed with thunderstorms coming through this area is that most of the time we just don't get a thunderstorm. We might get the edge of one, but it seems like they tend to split and come up and down the Susquehanna River Valley, or somehow go down south and on towards Montrose. Any geographical or weather reason for that happening?
Yeah, topography definitely plays a role. As far as how storms develop, you have to have an updraft. You have to have air at the ground, warm, humid air at the ground, be forced to move up, where it cools and condenses and makes the storms. All right? So if you have to have an updraft, and say your weather pattern's coming from the Allegheny Plateau and kind of downsloping from there, that's fighting against that updraft from being able to sustain itself. It can happen. Tornado can happen anywhere, but there are tornado or storms for that matter, there are preferred ways that occurs just based on our mountainous terrain, or lake breeze, right? Yeah, it all comes into play. And while I don't know your specific situation, I would venture a guess that your observations are spot on, based on just how things work out in the topography in your area.
Well, we have a couple of questions and observations from the chat.
Yeah.
Mary Carroll says, will we ever get to a point here of getting tornado sirens like they had in Missouri, in the Missouri town where I lived for a number of years? I mean, at some point, do we ever get to the point where we're seeing so many of these tornadoes that it's in the public safety to actually have tornado
Sure.
sirens?
So the thing about tornado sirens is they are not activated by the Weather Service.
Okay.
Every municipality makes that choice of whether or not to have tornado sirens. In the Central Plains, Great Plains, Tornado Alley, that's like a very big deal to them. And so they, their choice is to go ahead and do tornado sirens. Here's the other thing though, tornado sirens, it's audio only, right? And what if you're, sirens also started before air conditioning and people had their windows open. And say you're close to a municipality, great, you hear the siren. Well, what if you're not? What if your air conditioner's roaring, all your windows are shut, and it doesn't make sense for every location.
I would think also,
Put it that
here,
way.
where we have the rolling hills, you'd be in a valley, and you miss the,
Yeah.
miss that on the other side.
And then the other thing here,
Yeah.
and this is something that took me getting used to when I moved here a dozen years ago. I'm like, why am I keep hearing these tornado sirens? No, it's here, the fire departments
yeah.
do that.
Right.
Whereas in Michigan, they didn't do that. It's just, so anyway, yeah, it's
Yeah, Mary Carroll also mentions is that students, back when she was living in Missouri, that they had tornado drills where they would, in the spring, just like fire drills, to prepare for that. And our ever popular friend Lindsay from Adelaide, Australia. Everybody says hi to Lindsay.
Hey!
Anyway, she says, even though you know me as the lady in Adelaide, Australia, I grew up in Wisconsin and Illinois. Very familiar with the green sky and funny smell. My mother recalls a tornado in her childhood in Minnesota as well. So I guess that green sky kind of a situation or whatever
Yeah.
is it's
Yeah.
consistent elsewhere. So anyway, good to have you with us this evening or this morning, Lindsay. Any other questions? Well, Mark and Heather, thank you so much for coming here and helping us out, understanding more about tornadoes and what is and what isn't a tornado. And for those of you who just arrived or are here for the first time, we usually have a rule that says you can't leave here until you look through a telescope. Tonight, unfortunately, we're not going to really be in a position to have you look through a telescope, but we'd certainly be willing to take you on a tour through that. So, in fact, if you want to, if you had a
Yeah,
second,
Caitlin, you
come
wanna
join
check
us.
that out?
This is her first time here, so.
Yeah.
But if you did pay to get in, you can go back to the front desk, and we will give you a card to come back for free on another night. So, thanks again, the two of you. Next Friday is the talk about astronomy, mythology, and the telling of time. CRISPR is the weekend after, the Friday after that. So thanks again for coming, and we look forward to seeing you soon.
Thank you, Drew.